It is 1897, Queen Victoria's London, and an excited, well-to-do crowd gather outside a West End bookshop. Little did they know that they were about to witness the launch of a novel that would literally haunt, terrify, titillate, and sometimes amuse readers and eventually moviegoers for well over 100 years. The book's title? Dracula. Today we know Count Dracula as arguably the most iconic monster in fiction, portrayed in over 200 films, countless TV shows and stage productions. But how did this infernal creature come to exist? Who is the man who conjured him from the shadows of hell? This is the story of Bram Stoker and the making of Dracula. Bram Stoker was born in Dublin, Ireland in 1847, and his childhood was marked by illness. For the first 7 years of his life, he was bedridden with a mysterious ailment that doctors tried but couldn't diagnose. He couldn't stand or walk. His mother, Charlotte, spent hours at his bedside doing one of the most valuable things a parent can do for a child, reading and making up stories. But listening to his mother's gothic and gory tales left their mark. Death, disease, and darkness fascinated him. Then, perhaps terrified by one of his mother's terrifying tales, Bram miraculously not only recovered, but went from invalid to athlete, excelling in sports at Trinity College, Dublin. After university, Stoker worked as a civil servant by day, but by night he was drawn to the theatre, and he began writing theatre reviews for the Dublin Evening Mail, where he championed the performance of the actor Henry Irving. Irving was a towering figure on the Victorian theatre scene and was the first actor to receive a knighthood in Britain, becoming the most influential English actor-manager of the 19th century, transforming the Lyceum into London's premier theatrical venue. Irving's acting style was distinctive and somewhat controversial, with an unusual gait and manner of speaking that some found mannered or eccentric, but which created an intense, almost hypnotic stage presence. Flattered by Stoker's devotion, in 1878, Irving invited Stoker to become the business manager of his Lyceum Theatre in London. Stoker eagerly accepted, moving to England where he began a professional relationship that would last 27 years. Managing the Lyceum was demanding work, but somehow Stoker wrote and got published several novels and short stories, but none were particularly successful. Then something happened that would change everything. Stoker took a holiday to Whitby, a picturesque fishing village on England's northeast coast. Whitby was atmospheric, with its ruined medieval abbey looming over the harbour, reached by 199 stone steps. Fog rolled in from the North Sea. The whole atmosphere was ancient, eerie. It was perfect. Stoker was captivated and spent his days exploring, making notes, and learned about a Russian ship called the Dmitri that had run aground there years earlier during a storm. And, in a serendipitous moment, he discovered something crucial, a book in the local library called An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia. The book contained a footnote about a 15th century Wallachian prince named Vlad III, or more widely known as Vlad Drac, or Tepesh, meaning the Impaler, on account of his penchant for impaling his enemies and just about anyone else he took a dislike to. Drac, Stoker learned, meant son of the devil. While there's no historical evidence Vlad Drac drank blood, his reputation for sadistic violence made him Stoker's perfect villain, Dracula. Over the next 7 years, Stoker studied everything he could about Transylvania, Hungarian and Romanian folklore. vampire legends, and Eastern European geography. Unable to visit Transylvania, he pored over maps and travel books. In Vlad Drac's time, the province was part of Hungary. In Bram Stoker's, it was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, after the punitive post-World War I Treaty of Versailles, it is part of Romania. He also obsessively read about blood diseases, sleepwalking and hypnotism, all hot scientific topics of his Victorian era. But Stoker didn't invent the vampire. Vampire folklore had existed for centuries across Europe, with different cultures contributing their own variations. The undead, blood-drinking creatures appeared in Greek, Slavic and Romanian mythology long before Stoker put pen to paper. A particular influence was Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's Camilla. Stoker brilliantly synthesized all these influences, the mythical, the aristocratic, the seductive, and threw in a sprinkling of the penny dreadfuls. He combined all this with the real historical figure of Vlad the Impaler. Stoker also drew from his own life. Some scholars suggest that Henry Irving influenced Dracula's commanding theatrical presence, the spellbinding mesmerization of his performances that would give modern-day acting coaches a heart attack. One of the most distinctive aspects of Dracula is its structure. Stoker wrote it as a story told entirely through letters, diary entries, newspaper clippings and ship's logs. We piece together the horror from multiple fragmented perspectives. When the Demeter, the ship carrying Dracula to England, arrives at Whitby as a ghost ship with all crew dead or missing, we read about it through the captain's log. The effect is chilling. In a nutshell, then, the novel follows Jonathan Harker, a young solicitor who travels to Transylvania to help Count Dracula purchase property in England. Harker gradually realizes he's a prisoner in Dracula's castle and that his client is something unholy. Meanwhile, back in England, Harker's fiancée, Mina, becomes the target of a mysterious illness. Dracula is feeding on her. Enter Professor Abraham van Helsing, a Dutch doctor who knows vampirism when he sees it, and leads a group of men in a hunt for Dracula. The novel builds to a race against time as they pursue the Count back to Transylvania, where they destroy him before he can fully claim Mina. Interestingly, there are no stakes through the heart. This method of dispatching your local bloodsucker was part of folklore at the time, but seems to have been subsequently incorporated by the likes of Hammer House of Horror. However, Stoker's original story did feature crucifixes galore. Dracula operates on multiple levels. Yes, it's a thrilling horror story, but it's also a novel deeply embedded in its Victorian moment, reflecting the anxieties of the age, the fear of the foreign. Dracula comes from the East, from the margins of civilization as the Victorians understood it, to corrupt and sap the lifeblood from the heart of the empire. Dracula is literally an invasive species. There's sexual anxiety throughout the novel. The penetration of the fangs, the swooning ecstasy of the victims. Victorian society was deeply repressed about sex, yet fascinated by it. At a time when women were protesting and dying for equality in the vote, the novel portrays Mina as capable and intelligent, a new woman of the 1890s, yet the men in the story repeatedly patronize, overprotect and exclude her from their plans to thwart the vampire, which, ironically, makes her more vulnerable. Dracula was published on May 26, 1897. The first print run was 3,000 copies, bound in distinctive yellow cloth boards. Stoker had high hopes, even staging a dramatic reading at the Lyceum Theatre shortly before publication. The reviews were mixed. Financially, it was not the success Stoker hoped for, and he never saw major profits from Dracula during his lifetime. He continued his work at the Lyceum and wrote other novels, but none achieved what Dracula would eventually become. Stoker died in 1912 at the age of 64, just 14 years after writing his only masterpiece, never knowing that his vampire would become immortal in a way he himself could not be. His death certificate listed exhaustion. Dracula's transformation into a cultural phenomenon came after Stoker's death. The 1922 silent film Nosferatu, though made without permission, began the Count's life on the silver screen. Then came Bela Lugosi's iconic 1931 portrayal, which defined Dracula's image for generations. The slicked-back hair, the evening clothes, the Hungarian accent. Christopher Lee made him sexy and dangerous in all those Hammer House of Horror films. Gary Oldman's tragic romantic in Coppola's 1992 adaptation. Even George Hamilton IV had a crack as the spoof count in Love at First Bite. And then, of course, there's Dracula. But most hilariously is the 2000 film Shadow of the Vampire, which sees Willem Dafoe portray Max Schreck, the actor who played Count Orlok in the 1922 silent film Nosferatu. Max Schreck was made out to be a real vampire who could not stop himself from biting the terrified cast and crew. But I thought I would mention Frostbite, a 2006 Swedish comedy horror about a small town in the far north of Sweden that sees no sun in midwinter. The hilarious tagline for the movie is, "Dawn is just a month away." I digress. What drove Bram Stoker to create Dracula? Perhaps it was those childhood years trapped in bed, pondering mortality, his mother's dark tales conjuring shadow monsters after she kissed him goodnight. Perhaps it was Henry Irving's mastery of spell and suspense. Perhaps it was the specific anxieties of his age, sexual repression, fear of foreign influence, the clash between tradition and modernity. Or perhaps Stoker simply recognized something universal, our fascination with darkness, our terror of death, and our curiosity about what might exist beyond the grave. He took centuries of vampire folklore, a historical tyrant's reputation, and Victorian Gothic sensibilities, and forged them into something that still makes us shiver over a century later. Bram Stoker may have died in 1912, but Count Dracula lives forever. Thanks very much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed this gripping yarn. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. I look forward to welcoming you again to Gripping Yarns. Till next time.